Hi there, I'm Suzanna Williams. I'm the author of a young adult action adventure called ShockWaves. My story is about a girl called Paige who gets kidnapped by an ex-IRA terrorist, and Lee, the guy who goes to rescue her. Now, Lee and Paige are telepathic, and you might be thinking that's going to make it really easy for him to find her, but in actual fact, it leads to all kinds of complications. I'd like to read you a section from chapter 5. This is where Paige meets Lee in the foster home after her parents have been killed in a car crash, and they start to suspect that they have this special connection. Tick. Tick. 2 a.m. Paige stared at the clock. Her body ached from silent sobbing, her eyes felt sore, her pillow wet and her nose stuffy. Tick. This is the longest night of my life. Tick. Why hasn't Gavin rung? She'd received several texts from girls at the gym club and a short, weepy phone call from her friend Katie, but she really wanted to talk to Gavin. No, she needed to talk to Gavin. Tick. How could Uncle Roy leave me here, abandon me with strangers? Tick. And the social worker suggesting I need to see a doctor. Unless the doctor could bring her parents back from the dead, there was nothing he could do. Tick. Does no one understand what it's like to be really and truly alone? Another tear ran down her cheek and soaked into the pillow. Tick. She shivered. This house feels colder than the North Pole. Why does the heating turn off at night? Her mother would never have stood for that at home. Tick. Tick. Creak. Creak. Someone going downstairs. Joan? Maybe the hot water bottle she'd suggested was a good idea. Maybe I could sleep if my feet weren't freezing. Tick. It'd be better than watching the clock. Icy night air raised goosebumps as Paige slid from under the duvet. It was 3 a.m., the darkest part of the night. She wrapped the faded fleecy dressing gown she'd borrowed from Joan over her pyjamas and crept downstairs. Darkness pressed round her, but a yellow light shone through the kitchen door. She pushed it open to see Lee in his t-shirt and shorts. She let go of the door as if it had heated to 1,000 degrees. Geez! The hot chocolate Lee had been stirring splashed all over the worktop. Oh, it's you, she said. Who'd you expect? Lee asked. Father Christmas? He began soaking up the spilled chocolate with a dishcloth. I thought it would be Joan. Now what? She hadn't paid much attention to the other inhabitant of Highfield Road. After all, she was supposed to go to Scotland with Uncle Roy, and kids in foster homes were problem kids, the ones with dysfunctional families who bunked school, did drugs and stole things, right? She began to edge out of the door. Do you want a drink? Asked Lee. He grinned at her. No, I just want to go home, she wailed silently in her head. Out loud, she mumbled, I'm not really thirsty. That's handy, Lee peered inside the cup, because most of it's on the tabletop. Paige hesitated in the doorway. Thick brown chocolate had splashed up Lee's t-shirt and dripped onto a large bandage round his knee, but he didn't seem like a candidate for an ASBO. It had to be on my new Urban Free Flow shirt, he complained, dabbing at the stain with a tea towel. He glanced up and their eyes met. They were the brightest blue she'd ever seen, sort of laughing and serious at the same time. She stepped into the kitchen. The door swung shut behind her. Maybe a drink will stop me shivering, she said. I doubt it, said Lee. I didn't stop shaking for weeks after my mum died. Your mum? She stuttered. I didn't know. Lee picked up the cup and stared into it. Funerals suck, he remarked at last. You're so right. She sank onto the nearest chair. Shit, Lee stared at her as though he'd forgotten she was there. Did I say that out loud? She nodded. Sorry. He shifted his balance on the crutches. But that's what I wanted someone to say after Mum's funeral, he told her. I hated the everything-will be okay routine, when it clearly wasn't and never could be. Tears pricked her eyes. What are you doing? First you cry because no one understands. Now you cry because someone does. Lee put the remains of the hot chocolate on the table. "Drink that," he told her. "I'll make another." She wrapped her cold hands around the cup and watched as Lee flicked on the kettle and opened the fridge. He was quite tall and athletic looking, with short blonde hair. Older than her, but probably not by much. "Might as well make something to eat while I'm here." Lee began cutting chunks of cheese. "How does he do that? If his mum's dead, how does he carry on with life as though there's nothing wrong?" The comforting warmth of the cup began to spread through her hands. "It's like he flips a switch and everything's normal. Ouch!" A sharp pain sliced unexpectedly through her finger. Did Lee just say that at the same time? She jerked her hand away, sending chocolate sluicing out of the cup to form a puddle on the table, and nursed her hand, scanning for something that might have caused an injury. Nothing. Looking up, she saw Lee wiping a line of blood from his finger. "You cut yourself," she gasped. "Yeah," said Lee, He pointed at her, cradling her finger. "What did you do?" She let go of her hand and shrugged. The pain had faded. "Are you taking the mick?" Lee demanded. "No," she shook her head. It hurt." "What just happened?" Lee's eyes searched her face. "It's the same finger," he observed. She shivered. "How could you feel it?" he asked. His eyes were completely serious, like he was actually considering the possibility. Her brain churned with a myriad of reasons. Most of them involved such unlikely psychic phenomena she was embarrassed to have even thought them, let alone speak them. She pulled the dressing gown tighter. Lee hopped to the table without the crutches and sat opposite her. "This is going to make you think I'm a complete head case," he said. "But there's something I've got to tell you before it drives me mental." The butterflies returned to her stomach. "What?" she whispered. "You remember the morning you arrived?" Lee asked. She nodded. "And I asked if the car was red?" He scowled at the puddle of hot chocolate on the table. "I know this sounds stupid," he said, "but the car, the accident, I saw it." The butterflies twirled and fluttered. "What do you mean?" Her voice came out all croaky. "Well, one moment I'm watching the football, the next it's like I'm in a car crash," Lee explained. "And I saw you, your eyes, in the mirror. You screamed really loud." He put his hand to his forehead. "I've not been able to stop thinking about it. God, this sounds ridiculous, but when you did that with your finger, I figured maybe..." "Maybe what? Maybe I see things, feel things?" He must be mad to think she'd admit to that. But then he was admitting it, wasn't he? "What do you mean, you saw me?" she asked. Lee screwed up his face. "It was like I was inside your head, seeing what you saw. It was so clear, as if you were there," she finished for him. "Yeah," said Lee, "exactly." "Don't say any more. You know it's impossible. It's stupid. Remember what happened when you told Mum." Lee dabbed at the cup, making little red spots on his thumb. "My mum used to call me a daydreamer," he said. Paige shuddered. "My mother insisted I see a psychiatrist." "But in daydreams, you don't imagine people you've never met, and the next day they turn up for real," Lee continued. He held up his hand. A thin red line traced along his finger. "And in daydreams, I don't cut myself, and you feel the pain." She glowered at the cup, hoping to find something logical which might have caused the feeling in her finger. "You know what I'm talking about, don't you?" probed Lee. "You wouldn't have let the conversation get this far if you didn't." A chill ran down her spine that had nothing to do with the lack of heating in Highfield Road. After the psychiatrist episode, seeing things was something that she'd convinced herself didn't happen, something that couldn't happen. And mostly it hadn't. Until now.